Maya Whitfield's heels clicked against marble floors polished to a mirror shine, her arms full of files she should have left in the office an hour ago. The mansion was supposed to be empty this late, its usual hum of security and staff quieted into something closer to silence, and that was exactly why she thought it was safe to take the shortcut through the east wing toward the garage. But the double doors ahead of her stood open when they should have been closed, warm light spilling into the hallway, and low voices carried on air thick with the smell of grilled fish and sake. She stopped 2 steps short of the threshold, files clutched to her chest, and realized with a cold drop in her stomach that she had just walked directly into something she was never meant to see. 6 men sat around a long lacquered table. She recognized Rin Takahashi immediately at its head, his dark suit sitting on him like a second skin, black hair combed back from a face that gave away nothing even now, catching sight of her standing frozen in his doorway. The other men she did not recognize, and something about their unfamiliar faces, the careful stillness in a room, told her this was not a business dinner she had any business witnessing. Every head turned toward her at once. Maya had worked as Ren Takahashi's secretary for 8 months, long enough to know the difference between his ordinary silences and the kind of silence that meant danger had entered a room. This was the second kind. She felt it settle over the table like a held breath, felt the weight of 6 pairs of eyes assessing her, and somewhere beneath her professional composure her heart began to hammer against her ribs. "I am so sorry," she said quickly, already stepping back. "I did not realize you had guests. I will use another way out. Stay." Ren's voice cut through the room, quiet but absolute, the same tone he used when closing a negotiation that had already been decided in his favor. He had not raised his voice at all, and yet every man at that table stilled at the sound of it. Maya froze in the doorway, uncertain whether staying or leaving carried more risk. One of the unfamiliar men, older, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that moved over her with open calculation, leaned back in his chair. "Your secretary," the man said, and though his English was careful and accented, the disdain in it needed no translation. "She wanders into a private meeting between families, and you tell her to stay." "Interesting choice, Takahashi." "Miss Whitfield has excellent timing," Rin said, and something in the way he said her name made Maya's skin prickle, an inflection she had never heard from him in 8 months of quiet, professional distance. "She will be joining us for the remainder of the evening." The silver-haired man's mouth curled into something that was not quite a smile. "As what? A witness? Or insurance?" "As my guest," Rin said, and the finality in his tone closed the subject entirely. Maya understood, with a clarity that made her palms damp against the files she still clutched, that she had just been pulled into the middle of something far larger and far more dangerous than a delayed commute home. She set the files carefully on a side table near the door, buying herself a second to steady her breathing, and forced her spine straight the way she had learned to do years ago in rooms full of powerful men who expected women to shrink. Ren rose from his seat, crossing the room toward her with the unhurried precision she had watched him carry through every boardroom she had ever seen him occupy. Up close, she caught the faint note of cedar beneath something sharper, sandalwood maybe, a scent she had noticed before in passing but never this close, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. "Sit beside me," he said quietly, low enough that only she could hear it. "Say nothing unless I ask you a direct question. Watch everything." "What is happening here?" she whispered back, matching his tone. "Insurance," he said simply. "For both of us. Trust me for the next hour, Maya, and I will explain everything after." It was the first time in 8 months he had used her first name. She sat where he indicated, at his right hand, close enough that she could feel the tension radiating off the table like heat off summer asphalt. The silver-haired man, whom the others addressed as Kaido, studied her the entire time she settled into her seat, his gaze assessing, cataloging, deciding what use she might serve in whatever game was being played across that lacquered table. "This is Ishikawa Kaido," Rin said, low enough for her ears only, before turning his attention back to the table with the seamless authority of a man who had never lost control of a room in his life. "He believes my territory belongs to him. We are here to correct that belief." Dinner resumed around her, the conversation shifting into careful, coded language she only partially understood, references to shipments and routes and territories that meant nothing on the surface and clearly meant everything underneath. Maya kept silent, exactly as instructed, though she noticed things Ren likely wanted noticed. The way Kaido's men shifted uncomfortably whenever Ren spoke with that particular stillness in his voice. The way power in this room did not need volume to make itself understood. That was when she made the mistake of looking up and finding Ren already watching her, something unreadable moving behind his dark eyes before he returned his attention to Kaido without missing a beat of the conversation. An hour passed with agonizing slowness, tension coiled tight beneath every polite exchange, until Kaido finally set down his cup and rose from his seat, his men following in practiced unison. "We will speak again, Takahashi," Kaido said, his eyes flicking once more to Maya before he turned toward the door. "Perhaps next time your secretary will understand better where she does and does not belong." The threat in the words was unmistakable, and Maya felt it settle cold in her stomach even as she kept her expression carefully neutral, the way she had trained herself to do through years of difficult clients and worse bosses before this job. Ren said nothing in response, simply watched Kaido and his men leave with the patient stillness of a predator who had already decided the outcome of a hunt not yet finished. The moment the front door closed behind the last of Kaido's men, the mansion seemed to exhale around them, tension bleeding out of the walls themselves. Ren turned to her, and for the first time all evening, something in his controlled expression cracked into what looked almost like concern. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I think so." Her voice came out steadier than she expected, though her hands, she noticed, were not entirely steady. "You want to explain what just happened?" "I walked in here for a shortcut to my car and ended up sitting through what felt like a hostage negotiation. Kaido has been trying to move into my territory for months," Rin said, guiding her toward a smaller sitting room off the main hall, away from the lingering smell of the dinner and the memory of Kaido's cold assessment. Tonight was supposed to be a demonstration of strength. Numbers, control, the appearance that nothing in my house happens without my knowledge or permission. And then I walked in unannounced. "And then you walked in unannounced," he agreed, something almost like amusement flickering at the corner of his mouth, gone as quickly as it appeared, which should have undermined everything I was trying to demonstrate. Instead, I made a decision in the moment, and it worked in my favor. "How does inviting your secretary to a Mafia dinner work in your favor?" Maya asked, some of her earlier fear giving way to genuine confusion. "Because now Kaido believes you matter to me," Rin said, his voice quieter now, more careful. "A man who protects something in front of his enemies is a man with something to lose. It reads as strength, not vulnerability, when done correctly. It tells him I am not afraid to claim what is mine even in a room full of threats." Something in the phrase "what is mine" settled strangely in Maya's chest, a warmth she did not examine too closely in the moment. "So, I was a prop. You were, tonight, an asset I used without asking your permission first," Rin said, and something in the directness of the admission surprised her, a man like him rarely offering explanations at all, let alone honest ones. "For that, I apologize. It was necessary, but it was still your choice to make, and I took it from you." Maya studied him for a long moment. This man she had worked for 8 months without ever seeing beneath the careful, controlled exterior he wore to every meeting, every phone call, every interaction she had witnessed. The apology, brief and unadorned as it was, felt like something rare, an event rather than a courtesy. "You could have just told me to go home," she said. "Instead you made a decision that put a target on me in front of your rivals." "Yes," he said simply, no defense offered, no justification beyond the truth of it. "I am aware of what I did, Maya. I am also aware that Kaido does not forget faces, and he will not forget yours." The warmth in her chest curdled slightly into something closer to fear. "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means," Rin said, his voice dropping into something graver, "that from this point forward, you are not simply my secretary in Kaido's eyes. You are a piece on the board. I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, but I need you to understand the weight of what happened tonight before you leave this house." Maya sat with that for a long moment, the reality of it settling slowly through the adrenaline still humming beneath her skin. She should have been furious. Some part of her was furious at being used without consent, at being pulled into a world she had spent 8 months carefully staying on the professional edges of. But another part of her, quieter and more curious, noticed the way Ren watched her while he waited for her reaction, tension held in his shoulders like a man bracing for a verdict he could not control. "I'm not leaving tonight," she said finally. "Not until you tell me everything I need to know to actually protect myself, since apparently that's the position I'm in now." Something shifted behind Ren's eyes, surprise layered under something that looked, briefly, like respect. Most people, faced with the truth of what almost happened here tonight, would want as much distance from this house as possible. "I'm not most people," Maya said. "And I'd rather understand the danger than pretend it doesn't exist." Ren studied her for a long moment, and then, for the first time since she had known him, he told her the truth. He explained the territory war with Kaido's organization, a conflict that had been simmering for over a year, escalating from disputed shipping routes into something closer to open hostility. He explained the fragile balance of power in the city, the way his own organization held its ground through reputation and precision rather than raw numbers, and the way a single misstep, a single perceived weakness, could unravel years of careful positioning. He did not explain everything. She understood, even as he spoke, that there were depths to this world he was choosing not to show her yet, walls he kept standing even in the middle of unusual honesty. But it was more than he had ever offered her in 8 months of quiet professional distance, and she found herself listening with an attention that went beyond simple self-preservation. "Why tell me all this?" she asked, when he finally fell silent. "You could have given me the minimum and sent me home with a security detail." Ren was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes moving over her face like he was deciding how much more truth he was willing to offer in one night. "Because you deserve to understand what you have been pulled into. And because," he paused, something rare and unguarded crossing his features before he continued, "I find that I do not want to lie to you, even when the truth is inconvenient." The admission hung between them, heavier than either of them seemed prepared to address directly. Maya felt the weight of it settle somewhere beneath her ribs, warm and unfamiliar, and slightly terrifying in a way that had nothing to do with Kaido or the danger circling this house. "I should go home," she said finally, though she made no move to stand. "You should," Ren agreed, though he made no move to release her from the quiet gravity of the room either. "But I would prefer you stayed the night. Kaido's men may still be watching the property. I would rather not send you out into that uncertainty alone." Maya knew, rationally, that she should have insisted on going home, should have put distance between herself and a man whose world had just revealed itself to be far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But something in the quiet sincerity of his voice, the careful way he had told her the truth rather than managing her with reassurances, made her nod instead. "One night," she said. "Then we figure out what happens next." Ren showed her to a guest room on the 2nd floor himself, an act she suspected he did not perform for most people who passed through his house, and at the door he paused, close enough that she caught the cedar and sandalwood note of his cologne again, close enough to feel the careful restraint in the space he left between them. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not running." "I'm still deciding whether that was wise," Maya admitted. Something that was almost a smile touched his mouth, brief and gone before she could be certain she had seen it at all. "Good night, Maya." She lay awake long after the house had gone quiet, replaying the evening in fragments, Kaido's cold assessment, Ren's unexpected honesty, the strange warmth that had settled in her chest at the sound of her own name in his mouth. She told herself it meant nothing beyond survival instinct, the natural pull toward safety in a house full of danger. She was not entirely certain she believed herself. The days that followed changed the rhythm of Maya's work entirely. Ren's head of security, a broad-shouldered man named Haruto, began accompanying her between the office and the mansion, a silent presence that reminded her constantly of exactly how real the danger from that dinner had become. Ren himself grew more careful in small, deliberate ways, walking her to her car personally instead of leaving it to Haruto alone, appearing in her office doorway at odd hours with a question that could easily have waited until morning. She noticed the changes. She noticed, too, the way she had started noticing him, the particular stillness of his hands when he read through contracts, the low, controlled cadence of his voice when he was working through a problem that frustrated him, the rare moments his guard slipped enough to let something genuine surface before he caught himself and smoothed it back into careful neutrality. It was on the fourth day after the dinner that Kaito made his first move. Maya was leaving the office later than usual, Haruto a careful step behind her toward the parking garage, when a black sedan she did not recognize pulled alongside them at the entrance, windows tinted too dark to see inside. Haruto's posture shifted instantly, his hand moving toward the inside of his jacket, and Maya felt her pulse spike as the rear window rolled down just enough to reveal Kaito's cold, assessing face. "Miss Whitfield," Kaito said, his accented English precise and unhurried. "I wonder if you understand yet what you have become a part of." "I understand enough," Maya said, keeping her voice level despite the fear coiling tight in her stomach. Haruto had angled himself slightly in front of her, a wall of deliberate protection, but she did not step fully behind him, some instinct refusing to let fear reduce her to something purely passive. "Takahashi is a careful man," Kaito continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "But careful men make mistakes when something matters to them. You have become his mistake, Miss Whitfield. I would think carefully about how much longer you want to remain in that position." The window rolled back up before she could respond, the sedan pulling away smoothly into traffic, and Maya realized her hands were shaking only once the danger had actually passed. Haruto immediately pulled out his phone, already calling Rin, his voice tight with barely restrained urgency as he relayed what had happened. Rin arrived at the mansion before she and Haruto did, having left wherever he had been the moment Haruto's call came through, and he was waiting at the front entrance when their car pulled into the drive. He crossed the distance to her door before it had fully stopped, pulling it open with a force that spoke of fear finally breaking through his careful control. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands moving over her arms in a rapid assessment she recognized now as something he did whenever fear for her safety outpaced his composure. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice still carried a tremor she could not fully suppress. "He didn't touch me. He just wanted me to know he could have." Ren's jaw tightened into something carved from stone, fury radiating off him in waves that made even Haruto take a careful step back. "This ends now. I should have ended it the moment he threatened you instead of waiting for him to prove he meant it." "You couldn't have known he'd come for me directly," Maya said, though the reassurance felt thin even as she offered it. "I knew exactly what he was capable of," Rin said, his voice dropping into something colder and more dangerous than she had heard from him before. "I let myself believe he would take longer to act. That was my mistake, not yours." He led her inside, his hand settling at the small of her back with a protectiveness that had become familiar over the past days, though tonight it carried an urgency that had not been there before. In the study, he poured 2 glasses of something amber and handed one to her without asking, a gesture that felt less like hospitality and more like a man needing to give her something, anything, in the aftermath of a threat he could not fully control. "Tell me exactly what he said," Rin instructed, and Maya recounted the conversation as precisely as she could remember it, watching the fury in Ren's expression sharpen into something colder and more focused with every word. "He's testing how far he can push before I respond," Ren said once she had finished. "This was not a real attempt to hurt you tonight. This was a message. The real move will come without warning, and it will not stop at words." "Then what do we do?" Maya asked, and the "we" surprised her even as she said it, an admission that she had already, somewhere in the last 4 days, stopped thinking of this as purely his problem to solve. Ren's eyes met hers, something raw flickering behind his usual composure. "We end this before he decides to escalate further. But Maya, I need you to understand what that means. This will not stay clean. If I move against Kaito directly, the retaliation will be real, and you will remain a target until it is finished." "I'm already a target," Maya said. "Pretending otherwise doesn't make it less true." Something in Ren's expression shifted, an admiration he did not bother hiding this time. You are the first person outside my organization who has ever looked at this world clearly and chosen to stay rather than run. Maybe I'm not staying because I'm brave, Maya said quietly. Maybe I'm staying because running feels like it would cost me something I'm not ready to lose. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than either of them seemed prepared for, and Ren set his glass down slowly, crossing the small distance between them until she could feel the warmth radiating off him, close enough to see every flicker of restraint fighting against something more honest beneath his careful control. I told myself I would not do this while Kaido is a threat to your safety, he said, his voice rough in a way she had never heard from him. I told myself it would be selfish to want something for myself while you are in danger because of decisions I made. And now, Maya asked softly. Now I am finding it difficult to remember why that mattered, Ren admitted, reaching up to brush his knuckles gently along her jaw, a touch so careful it contrasted violently with everything she knew he was capable of in a room full of enemies. You walked into my private dinner 4 days ago by accident, Maya, and I have not been able to stop thinking about you since. That's dangerous, she whispered, though she made no move to step back from him. Everything about me is dangerous, Ren said. I would rather you know that clearly than pretend otherwise. I know exactly what you are, Maya said, echoing words she had not planned to say until they were already leaving her mouth. I've known since that dinner. I'm still here. He kissed her then, careful at first, like a man testing whether the moment could hold the weight of what he was finally allowing himself to want, and when she did not pull away, when her hand rose instead to rest against his chest, something in him seemed to unlock entirely, the kiss deepening into something certain and unhurried despite the danger still circling outside these walls. When they finally broke apart, Ren rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady in a way she suspected he rarely permitted himself to be. This complicates everything, he said quietly. Kaido will use this against us both if he learns how much you mean to me now. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance, Maya said, and for the first time since walking into that dinner 4 nights ago, she felt something steady beneath the fear, a determination that had nothing to do with survival, and everything to do with choosing to fight for something rather than simply enduring it. 3 days later, Maya discovered the informant. She had stayed late at the office reviewing shipment documentation Ren had asked her to organize, work that had nothing directly to do with a conflict with Kaido, but everything to do with the legitimate business operations that ran alongside it. Buried in a file she was not meant to see, a discrepancy in a delivery manifest caught her attention, dates and locations that did not align with what Ren's security team had briefed the household on that same week. She should have brought it straight to Ren. Instead, some instinct told her to dig deeper first, cross-referencing the discrepancy against older files until a pattern emerged that made her stomach turn cold. Someone inside the organization had been feeding Kaido information about the household schedule, security rotations, the exact timing that would have made an attack on Maya during her commute possible in the first place. The name attached to the discrepancy was Daichi, one of Ren's mid-level lieutenants, a man she had seen at the mansion dozens of times, always polite, always careful around her in a way she had never questioned until now. She brought the files to Ren immediately, her hands steady despite the fear humming beneath her composure, and watched his expression shift from confusion into something cold and absolute as he reviewed what she had found. You're certain of this, Ren said, though his tone told her he already believed it. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidence, Maya said. Every discrepancy lines up with the moment Kaido's people showed up somewhere they shouldn't have known to be. Ren was silent for a long moment, something dangerous settling behind his eyes. Daichi has been with this organization for 6 years. I trusted him with details I trust almost no one else with. Then we need proof before you confront him, Maya said. If we're wrong, it could tear apart trust in your organization for nothing. If we're right, he needs to be handled carefully, not emotionally. Something in Ren's expression eased slightly, gratitude layered beneath the fury still simmering underneath. You did something today that could have gotten you killed if Daichi had realized what you found before you brought it to me. I did something that might have just saved both our lives, Maya said. I'd call that a fair trade. Ren's men confirmed the betrayal within hours, a hidden line of communication between Daichi and Kaido's organization that had been running for months, feeding details that had made every one of Kaido's moves possible, including the confrontation outside Maya's office. Daichi did not deny it when confronted, only stared at Ren with the particular defiance of a man who had already decided the cost of his betrayal was one he was prepared to pay. Maya did not ask what happened to Daichi after that. She understood, by now, that some parts of this world she was not meant to witness directly, and she had made her peace with the boundaries of what she needed to know versus what she needed to accept. That night, with Daichi's betrayal exposed and dealt with, Ren found her in the kitchen, unable to sleep, the adrenaline of the day still humming too loud beneath her skin to allow for rest. Kaido will retaliate for this, Ren said quietly, coming to stand beside her. Losing his informant costs him everything he's built toward taking my territory. He will not let that go without a response. Then we're ready for it, Maya said, though her voice carried less certainty than she wanted it to. I need to end this properly, Ren said. Tonight. Before Kaido has time to plan something worse than what he's already tried. Fear tightened cold in Maya's chest at the thought of him walking directly into confrontation with Kaido's organization. Let me come with you. Absolutely not, Ren said, his voice leaving no space for negotiation. This is not something I can protect you through if you are standing beside me when it happens. I'm not asking to fight beside you, Maya said. I'm asking not to be left here wondering if you're alive. Ren crossed the space between them, cupping her face with a tenderness that felt entirely at odds with the coldness she knew lived beneath his composure when danger demanded it. I will come back to you. I need you here, safe, so that fear for you does not become the thing that gets me killed tonight. She hated the logic even as she understood it completely, and she nodded against his palm, memorizing the warmth of his hand against her skin in case the night ahead took that warmth away from her permanently. Ren left an hour later with 4 of his most trusted men, and Maya sat alone in the mansion study, unable to eat, unable to focus on anything beyond the slow crawl of the clock toward dawn. She thought about the 8 months she had spent believing her job was simple, professional, contained safely within the boundaries of contracts and correspondence, and she thought about how quickly one accidental turn into a dining room had unraveled every assumption she had built her life around. Dawn broke without word, and Maya had worn a path into the study floor by the time the sound of cars finally crunched against the gravel drive outside. She was at the front door before she had consciously decided to move, and when Rin emerged from the lead car, exhausted but standing, alive, something in her chest finally allowed itself to breathe again. He crossed the distance to her at a pace just short of running, and she met him halfway, his arms closing around her with a force that spoke of a fear he had carried the entire night and was only now allowing himself to release. It's finished, he said quietly into her hair. Kaido will not threaten this house again. Will not threaten you again. Maya pulled back just far enough to search his face for injuries, finding a shallow cut along his temple that he brushed off before she could examine it further. You're hurt. It's nothing that matters, he said, catching her hand before she could reach for the cut, pressing a kiss to her palm instead. What matters is that I spent the entire night thinking only of getting back to you. Not the territory. Not the organization. You. I know, Maya said softly. I felt the same thing every minute you were gone. He led her inside, and the mansion, tense and watchful for days, finally seemed to exhale around them. The danger that had followed since that first accidental dinner finally lifted from every corner of every room. Haruto and the other men moved through the halls with the loose, easy postures of soldiers finally permitted to stand down, and somewhere in the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifted through the house, ordinary and grounding after a night that had felt like anything but ordinary. Later that morning, once Rin had washed and the immediate business of the night's aftermath had been settled by men who required no instruction to know their roles, he found Maya in the study again, exactly where he always seemed to find her now, exactly where she had chosen to remain. I have something to say to you, he said, and something in his tone made her set down the papers she had been absently reorganizing, giving him her full attention. You walked into my dining room by accident, Rin said. I told myself, that first night, that using you as I did was purely strategic. A necessary decision in a dangerous moment. I've spent every day since telling myself something similar, that keeping you close was about your safety, about controlling the narrative Kaido believed about us. And now, Maya asked. Now I no longer believe any of the reasons I gave myself, Rin said, closing the distance between them until she could feel the warmth radiating off him, could see every flicker of vulnerability he had stopped bothering to hide from her. You are not an asset to me, Maya. You are not a piece on the board. You are the first person who has ever looked directly at what I am and chosen to stay regardless of the cost. Maya felt something in her chest crack open, warm and terrifying and entirely undeniable. When I walked into that dining room, I thought I had made the worst mistake of my career. I didn't know I was walking toward the truest thing that's ever happened to me. Stay, Rin said quietly, the word carrying a weight far beyond its simplicity. Not because of danger, not because Kaido is finally handled. Stay because this house has felt like something worth protecting since the moment you first stood in that doorway. Maya's answer was not spoken in words. She closed the last distance between them and kissed him slowly, deliberately, a promise offered without the fragility of language, and when they finally broke apart, Ren rested his forehead against hers the way he had the night everything between them had first shifted into something neither of them could pretend was simply professional. You are not staying because you have nowhere else to go, he said softly. You are staying because you belong here. You have belonged here since the night you walked through the wrong door and refused to be afraid of what you found on the other side of it. Outside, the mansion settled into its familiar rhythm, security resuming quiet rounds, the machinery of a dangerous world continuing to turn the way it always had before Maya ever accidentally walked into the middle of it. But inside the study, wrapped in the arms of a man who had once been nothing more than the boss she answered to, Maya understood that she had not simply survived a threat meant to break them both apart. She had found, at the end of one accidental wrong turn, exactly the place and the person she had never known she was looking for.